Hello and welcome again to a new episode of the QCast. I'm John, and I'm joined again by my good pal Eddie. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, John. How are you?
Doing well. Enjoying the pristine weather we have here in Colorado.
It's a great time of year to be outside enjoying pickleball.
Oh, my goodness. It is beautiful here. But how's your week?
Well, no.
You don't know? You're still deciding?
Work's been crazy, so it's hard to balance that with the fun of pickleball sometimes.
I mean, is there really a balance to be had? I think pickleball just takes over, and, you know.
It should.
It should.
If only there was employment in the sport.
Right.
How about you, John?
Good week.
You're back on your feet.
I'm back on my feet. Yeah,
Nice.
I'm actually playing, slightly competitively again. Trying not to leap or sprint. Those are my two, areas I'm not supposed to be doing yet. But good. The foot's not swollen. And, the only issue is my body isn't exactly where I think it's going to be. So I have a tendency to, shank a lot of balls and whiff a few balls because my foot's a little tentative right now. And I think I can get a ball. And
So is that a foot problem or a mind problem?
I think it's both. My mind is telling me to be cautious, and my foot just is kind of waking up. But
Well, that's great that you're back.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is that some of the aches and pains that were just kind of chronic are now a little better after sitting for 3 months as they should be. So I'm hoping to come back stronger. We'll see.
So what's the aftercare at this point for your injury?
I'm going through PT right now. So we've got a good physical therapist in Boulder that Scott Fliegelman recommended. And she does all the cupping and scraping, which, oh my God, on the bottom of your foot after it comes out of a cast for 2 months. Like, it is excruciating. We were joking. She was like, how's the pain this time? I'm like, well, not quite as medieval as last time. And she's like, some guy, one of my other clients brought in like a medieval torture book at one point and bought it as a present for her and was like, hey, you can add your cups and scrapers into this book. I mean,
right after tarring and feathering and drawing and quartering.
Yeah, right.
Some weird crap going on back then, man.
Oh my God. Yeah, but it is very effective. And, I see like the mobility increase actually there in the hour that I'm doing it. And so my toe was locked, my big toe, totally locked up after getting out of a cast for 2 months. It was just like, well, I guess we're dead now. I don't need to move at all. And now it's back to getting close to normal.
Well, take care of yourself, John.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, I'm excited to get back into it. It was like 3 hours felt like, when you're kind of first starting to play pickleball and it's just like, another game, please. That I had that, childlike enthusiasm again after being away for a while. You take it for granted, and when you come back, it feels great.
Well, it's better than, not one more.
Right. But, Eddie, we do have a stack show today, so we should probably jump into it. We're going to get into some latest news, mostly about, the new UPA-A paddle certification program that kicked in.
Oh, man, that was all over social media for a couple days.
Yeah. So we'll kind of, and it's day by day, we're getting more and more information. So if you feel like you've heard all this from other podcasts, stick around because we've got some new news. Beyond that, we're going to get into a few paddles of the week. We've got the Luzz paddles, the Pro Cannon, as well as the Pro 4 Inferno. We've got a paddle that was given to me in Hong Kong by a big Vietnamese brand called Facolos. They're Elite-X. We've got the Carbon TruFoam Genesis Waves, which we can't talk in great detail. It's kind of still an embargo, but we can show the paddle and give our initial impressions. Beyond that, we've got some deep dive / tales from the ball cannon about whether or not adding weight to the Quanta affects it. And we're also going to give our updated thoughts on the Quanta. We had some preliminary thoughts last week after playing with it for a few hours. Got some better data now and better feel for the paddle. Beyond that, for the deep dive, we're going to look a little bit at break-in for the Lifetime ball compared to the Vulcan and the Franklin X40. And then some Q&A.
Man, John, we had this crazy summer of new pickleball paddle releases, and then we had a week where it was slow, and now we're back into it. So here we go again.
I don't think it's as crazy as July and early August, but yeah, they're not slowing down as much as one would think. Okay, Eddie, let's jump into kind of where we are in terms of UPA-A certification. And just a blanket statement to start off with, because I think this is important. I think there are a lot of people out there who are thinking, is this affecting me as a player at PPA tournaments? And it's not. So, there's the Selkirk Boomstik statement that UPA-A put out. We'll talk about that in detail in a second. There's the kind of shuffle we're seeing right now in Cincinnati at the PPA Slam there in Cincinnati, where pros aren't sure what paddles they're supposed to be playing with, et cetera. None of that is affecting the amateur ranks, And last year playing pro qualifier or pros, none of this is relevant to you. You can still play with your paddles at PPA events. So let's get into the Boomstik. So UPA-A released the statement on the Boomstik. Basically, just a lot of people covered this, so I'm gonna kind of gloss over it a little bit, but just kind of put it in context. So basically saying the only paddle that is UPA-A certified is the Boomstik without the MOI weighting system on it. So those MOI weights, 7.5 grams on each side, which are kind of, quote, semi-permanent on there. We saw Catherine Parinto playing with that and Jack Sock playing with that in the previous weeks leading up to Cincinnati, but they're not allowed to play with that particular one at this one. And Selkirk has sent out Boomstiks without any weights on them for their pros.
And that's for the elongated paddle.
Just the elongated, right. The wide body is not on the approved list, so not sure exactly what happened there, if it failed one or more of the tests. Mm-hmm. But just the elongated. And maybe I don't think any of the pros will be playing with the wide body because none of them traditionally have played with that shape before. So just Catherine and Jack right now. Because James Ignatowicz is gone as well. But he doesn't play with the wide body either. So I don't think it's an issue for the pros. So, it's just, I think the statement was saying, like, they didn't submit it for approval with the weights on. So the one that is approved does not have weights. So that's what is approved. And, if they want to resubmit. I'll also talk in a bit in the deep dive about whether or not the weights added to the sides, if you measure the width to the end of the weights, puts that paddle, the Boomstik, over the rule of 24. So
John, clarify, because I thought that part of the issue was the weights themselves being a kind of a semi-permanent, but semi-not permanent part of the paddle, not just what was submitted to UPA.
Right. So that's the kind of the low-hanging fruit for UPA-A saying, this wasn't submitted, so it's not approved. But beyond that, it's debatable whether or not it actually could be approved because of its quote-unquote semi-permanent status, right? They, in the same way that Reload can't be approved for UPA-A because they have removable sheets, there's specific language in the regulations concerning what can and can't be added. So there's an OEM state for the paddle, and you can't have removable parts on that. But you can put, obviously, perimeter weight to an OEM paddle, stock or overgrips, can manipulate things in that regard. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the MOI weights, it's debatable whether or not they ever will be approved in the pro ranks.
Where do you think that debate would end up? Because it's not really removable. It's not intended to be moved or even removable.
No,
like a Reload sheet.
Yeah, I think if Selkirk, they're a little bit on the fence right now. Like even when I talked with Tom Barnes a couple of weeks ago, he was like, if you want to remove them, technically you can. They're difficult to get off. And, so that kind of surprised me because I was like, well, I tried to get mine off for mine when I was dissecting it, and the edge guard came off with it. Mm-hmm. And in my review, I was like, don't do this. You're going to damage your paddle. And I suspect that 90% of the people will damage their paddle if they try to take those weights off. I've seen some like hair dryer stuff, like a heat gun, to loosen up the epoxy before and successfully taking it off. But I wouldn't call that semi-permanent because that leads people to believe that it's modifiable, and I don't really think it is. So I think they're going to have to come down on these are permanent. Do not try to remove them. That will void the warranty. And if they do that, then I think there's an argument to be made to UPA-A whether or not they would allow them. But I think there would still be a hurdle there because I think, if the reload sheets aren't approved, why are these? I guess you do remove them. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Eddie? If the reload can't be approved because it has removable parts, then could the MOI system be approved?
I think it should be.
Yeah.
I don't even know why they're using the term semi-permanent
right.
because clearly they're intended to be a permanent part of the paddle. There's no intention for them to be moved or removed. It's like saying the edge guard is semi-permanent. I mean, that could be removed, but clearly that's not meant to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move the part that we're going to talk about in deep dive to now because it's more relevant now. But I actually measured with the weights, with the MOI weights from edge to edge. Yeah, pull one of those down. So the rule of 24, which applies to both USAP and UPA-A, is that the maximum length plus the maximum width of a paddle cannot exceed 24 inches. So when you measure from here to here, not including the MOI weights, the paddle comes in at like length plus width, both the wide body and the elongated, right on that boundary. So it's like 23.99. Right?
Okay.
With the weights, it's like 24.01.
No way.
Yeah. And that's using a tape measure. So it's clearly, there's some variability in tape measures. It's not as accurate as like 0.01 inch. But it leads me to suspect that if they wanted to include the MOI weights as permanent, then they're probably going to have to make them a little less pronounced sticking out of the edges.
There's this tiny little flat top here. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. It's not an arrow top completely, but it's kind of a flattened out arrow top. And maybe they need to flatten out just a little bit more.
Get a mallet on all of the paddles.
Exactly.
It's even on the wide body, I noticed that flat spot. I thought originally, I was like, is this a blemish? But no, it's just the way they're made.
Yeah, so it's just barely over according to your tape measure.
Yep, according to my tape measure. A really scientific tape measure. But I suspect they might be slightly over. Yeah, and you could also fix it with the butt cap, right? That's a very thick, beefy butt cap.
And that little S there just protrudes slightly.
Right. Yeah, so interesting stuff there. Okay, let's move on to the broader issue of what's going on in Cincinnati this week. What paddles can pros play with and what can they not play with? So kind of really briefly to summarize, the interim certification at the UPA-A ended on September 1st. And the interim certification involved basically deflection testing and spin testing, right? And the full certification requires the PEF, which is UPA-A's version of PBCOR, together with still they're doing spin, still they're doing deflection, and they're also doing accelerated break-in, or ABI. That's the full certification. So if you look at, I'll put the link in the description for what the full 2025 certified paddles list is for the UPA-A, which is continually being updated. There are some notable missing paddles from that list. So not every paddle model from each brand has been granted approval, according to what I looked at right before we came on the podcast this morning. So some missing ones are the Franklin C45 Hybrid. All the other C45s, the Tempo, the Dynasty, and the 14 and the 16 are all on this list, but not the C45 Hybrid. Don't know why, but it maybe possibly failed. I would imagine if it had to fail anything, it's probably going to be spin for whatever reason. They don't generate crazy spin, but there's some variance in peel play, from paddle to paddle, and maybe it just happened to be a particularly gritty one that was submitted for approval. The Yola Magnus Pro 4 16 mil. So the 14 mil is approved, but the 16 mil is not on that approved list, as well as the Yola Scorpius Pro 4 16 mil, whereas the 14 mil and upright is on the approved list. So looking at these, and again, I don't know what failed on these, spin, deflection, ABI. I would put it between ABI and PEF, because if you look at the two that failed, out of all the Yola Pro 4 list, they're both 16 millimeter. And that's something about these Yola Pro 4s that is very true, where the 14 millimeters don't hit as hard as the 16 millimeters. Usually it's the opposite. And the thinner paddle overall has more firepower. Not for the Pro 4s. You get more trampoline effect with the thicker cores. And, a lot of reviewers were like, I feel like the 14 millimeter is more the control version and the 16 mil is the more power version. I tend to agree. I think that lends me to kind of lean over into the maybe it failed PEF. However, my KewCOR scores, we talked about this last week, on all of the Yola Pro 4s are deflated. They're not where I think they should be in terms of where they actually play. They all come in like at 0.39, 0.40, and that is kind of low to mid tier in the power category. And I feel like they're mid to high tier right now, So unless my KewCOR is getting different results than PEF, which I think they're going to be highly correlated. So my other thing is maybe they failed on the ABI, accelerated break-in. I think that's actually more likely than the PEF, if you ask me, because there are known issues of the Yolas changing.
And do you think that's random, or do you think there's something about that particular paddle shape and structure that would cause it to be broken in differently than the others?
Yeah, I think it's probably random. Yeah. I mean, I could see maybe if it was both of the Scorpii being a wide body, it might have more susceptibility to kind of, the torque or the bending damage that can happen with the break-in. But yeah, so it's the Magnus, which is the elongated, and the Scorpius, but they're both 16 millimeters. So maybe the 16 millimeter, the thicker cores have a tendency to crush more than the 14 millimeter cores.
Interesting.
So again, this is all speculation. I did not verify this with anybody at the paddle companies or at UPA-A. Another paddle on the list here, which is not on the list, is the Proton Flamingo. Also, surprisingly, the Pickle Hurricane Pro. Big surprise there. Multiple PaddleTech 12.7 millimeter paddles. So the ALWC 12.7, I think the TKO CX 12.7, not on the list. The Selkirk Project Boomstik wide body, not on the list, not even without the MOI weights. So yeah, I did reach out to Pickle regarding the Hurricane Pro, and they said that it failed spin, surprisingly. And, clearly Tyra is not happy. She sent out a tweet saying, I'll read it here, found out just days before a slam that my paddle isn't approved. It's been tested hundreds of times and only failed once. Then passed the next day, so I was definitely shocked. So I think what she means by the tested hundreds of times is the on-site testing with deflection. And now I'm in a pro tournament in Cincinnati and don't know what paddle to use. So sucks for Tyra. So I did, again, hear from Pickle that it was spin. Doesn't make much sense to me. Yeah, it's a high spin paddle, but it's not any grittier. It's less gritty, I'd say, than the grittiest paddles on the market today. Regardless, I don't know. This is bound to happen at some point, like when you're enforcing regulations. We would have loved to seen this happen weeks before and have Tyra not just find out, on the heels of or right before a tournament, right? Because that's got to throw her for a loop. I asked one of the owners of Pickle and apparently it's not. There is a Pickle Vantage Pro on the approved list, but it's the Pickle Vantage Pro X, which is apparently a new shape that neither Tyra or Gabe prefer. Gabe likes his original Vantage Pro shape, and Tyra likes the wide body, so neither one of them are playing with that. So Gabe is also without a paddle this tournament. So I was trying to get caught up on all of the videos from the tournament, and I have not seen anything with Tyra or Gabe playing, so we don't know which paddles they're playing with. But the owner of Pickle said that they will be playing with Franklin's, even though they're still Pickle Pros, still sponsored by.
That's tough because she in particular has been on fire lately.
Oh, I know.
Playing so well, and this distraction is really not helpful.
There's nothing in the Franklin lineup that is very close to the Hurricane Pro. It is the Hurricane Pro wide body, control paddle. It's almost exactly the same shape as the Selkirk wide body, which is not UPA-A approved, but it plays way differently than the Selkirk because it's a control paddle. So yeah, if I had to pick for Tyra out of the Franklin lineup, maybe the Tempo, because it's also a wide body, doesn't quite hit as hard. Like the C45 is not a crazy power paddle, but doesn't play much like the...
Oh, and just the feel is completely different,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I mean, maybe the original Tempo, what was their versions before the C45s? I forget the names of them. I forget. Just their Gen 2, that might actually be fairly close, you know. I think they were a little heavier than the Hurricanes. Regardless, yeah, not good for Gabe and Tyra. So we'll see what they're playing with. And by the way, I consistently update my People's Choice Pro Paddles database, so I'll link to that in the description too. I've got several sightings of pros playing with very different paddles this week, which we'll talk about here in a second. So yeah, again, not casting blame on the UPA-A or Pickle. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. I don't know if Pickle knew about it before, they had to drop the news to Tyra, or it wasn't known to Pickle until a couple of days ago. But regardless, we would like to see things move better. But I'm not casting judgment because I know that in this rapidly changing landscape, it's hard to keep up for everybody, right? So
it's interesting, John. You look at the list and your mind picks up on what's not on the list. Mine went right to,
okay,
there's some interesting things on the list.
Oh, yeah, I love it. What do you got?
The Engage Pro Foam, we haven't seen that one yet.
Okay.
That's on the list. 6.0 Ruby Pro, we haven't seen that one yet.
Mm-hmm.
The Sypic Avatar, that's been bandied about for a bit. We haven't seen that.
Mm-hmm.
At least I haven't. And then there's a company called Nox, N-O-X, and they've got a number of paddles, foam paddles on the list, and curious to see what that's about.
Yeah. I think if it's the same Nox, they're the biggest manufacturer of padel rackets.
Yeah, and they have a lineup now that it's, they got the big carve out, a la Selkirk style
neck holes.
Right.
Why?
But this new line is not like that.
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
All.
What is it about padel companies loving the neck holes? Anyhow, so yeah, that's all interesting. And so the 6.0 Ruby Pro is on there. I think the Black Opal is also
yes,
on
it
there.
is.
Okay,
yep.
yeah. So hey, we're not spilling any beans here, but it was right there on the published website.
That's right.
Yeah. So all interesting stuff. Hopefully that clears it up. Things are in a state of flux. But again, to bring it back to the point we started at, this is not affecting amateurs. Okay, back to what the pros are currently playing with. And again, I'll link to my spreadsheet on this. So not only does the spreadsheet have the current paddles that pros are all playing with and links to like reviews and stuff of those paddles, but also there's a way for you to vote who your favorite pro is, linked right there on that page, and that's why it's People's Choice. So I think right now Ben is on top and Annalise right below, but it goes all the way down to 50. And you can submit votes for pros that you don't see on the list that you want to be on the list. But right now, we're seeing James Ignatowicz playing with a Yola. It's either the Agassi or the Graph Pro. Couldn't make out the design, but he was playing singles yesterday with a Yola, which is odd to me because he has his own company now, RPM. And I saw the RPM paddle on the approved list, I think. God, things are starting to get all mixed up in my head, but I think
I don't recall seeing it there.
Okay. Maybe it's UPA USAP approved, so it's probably not UPA, which explains why he's not playing with it now. But I heard from him last week that he's still obligated to play with the Selkirk this week at Cincinnati, but he's not playing with the Selkirk. He's playing with the Yola. Maybe it's because of the mix-up with the Boomstik. I'm not sure. But regardless, playing with the Yola, Agassi, or Graph. Annalie Waters is not playing with her 12.7 millimeter ALWC Bantam because it's not approved anymore. And we didn't talk about why those failed, but I have to think that it has to be PEF. All the 12.7s failed, but the 14.3 didn't. And now they have a new 13 millimeter ALWC, which she's playing with in Cincinnati. So just 0.3 millimeters difference between the paddle thicknesses apparently allowed this 13 millimeter ALWC to pass. So interesting. So you'll see her playing with a ever so slightly thicker paddle. The way I noticed it was different is because of the graphics. Clearly, you can't see the difference in thickness looking through the television screen, but it's not the same graphics as you see on our current signature model. Catherine Brento and Jack Sock are both playing with elongated boomsticks without the MOI, and they're both adding tungsten and lead to those. Tyson McGuffin.
Do you think they're weighting those up to be more or less what the stock is now?
That's a good question. For Catherine's, I saw the skinny Selkirk tungsten along the neck and the top corners, and then what looked like something at 3 and 9, either like a 3-gram lead strip or something beefier. So similar, but yeah, not just stacking weight at 3 and 9. I couldn't tell on Jack, so he was on like grandstand court, and the camera angle wasn't that great. Tyson McGuffin playing with what looks like a Magnus 3X 3S, so not the 4, but the graphic, so it has the gradient edge guard, unlike the 4, but the graphics are different, and I think it might be, you probably saw this too, on the approved list are some Yola dual certified 3Ss, and I think they might have slightly different graphics. So I think he's playing with a Magnus 3S dual certified paddle. And again, we heard from Pickle, the company that Tyra and Gabe will be playing temporarily with Franklin paddles this week. So if anybody sees before me which paddles they're playing with, shoot me an email. There is a link on that People's Choice page for you to give me a heads up on what pros are playing with. And there we have it.
Interesting time, John.
Yeah. Like we said, it must be crazy to be a pro dialed into a paddle and have to play with something different on the spur of the moment.
I mean, that's akin to a pro golfer changing drivers
right
days before a major tournament, and that would be really unheard of.
Yeah, it'd be unfortunate. Not advisable. Okay, one last thing before we get into POTW. I missed the MLP finals when they were live because I was in China, but I went back and watched all the reruns, not all of them, but the key moments. And did you get a chance to watch the finals?
Here and there.
Okay.
Yep, some highlights.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the finals, but it was the lead up to the finals that has converted me, Eddie, to an MLP fan. I used to not really care for that format. I felt it was a little bit cringy, how they're trying to make it like more kind of vibrant and over the top, and it felt a little bit fabricated, less real to me, and hard to follow who's with what team and why they are associated with which city and et cetera, and why it changes each year. So, those were the hurdles for me to really get on board with it. But what won me over was seeing just like the different energy and the energy that the pros bring and the crowd brings, which was real. Have you ever seen J.W. Johnson like get psyched up and start yelling? You ever seen that at PPA events? I was shocked. Like he was yelling, going back to the sideline, and he sat on the bench like I don't know what to do with these emotions. Like I love seeing that, and seeing this. Like it has from you and I playing, we played a couple of MLP events. One was the host versus co-host tourney thing that we had just for fun. And we actually played in a tournament a couple years ago, last year. It is a heightened sense of responsibility and just more, it just creates a different feel. It's not just you and your partner, it's you and your partner and 2 others. It's a team feeling, and you feel like a lot more pressure to uphold.
Yeah, and in the case of, not in our case as amateurs going into this, because we kind of all knew each other and had played with each other and even partnered with each other. But in the case of MLP, you have different matchups than you would see week to week in the PPA. And that makes for some really dynamic interactions, right? Because people who are across the net are now on the same side, and that's fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. So, if I'm feeling nerves at the amateur level, in tournaments that don't mean anything, and even in the host versus co-host, like when you and I came out on the court together for singles, I was nervous because, I was like, man, I've got to
well, you brought it, man.
Look okay.
You leveraged it.
Somehow it worked, but yeah, there was a level of nervousness, and I can't imagine amplifying that to the pro level. But what I also love is seeing how the players handle it, and they handle it differently. Like one of the things about MLP that's always been the case is that underdogs tend to have much more of a chance than the top dogs of the PPA. And it used to be people would blame that on the rally scoring system, which does allow people to come back from behind, when the scores are locked. But we're not using rally scoring anymore outside of the Dream Breaker. So that's not it. It's just something about this format that equalizes the playing field a little bit more. And yes, there's maybe an argument that there's definitely an argument that the top players, Anna Lee and Ben, are, don't have as good of a chance as the others because of the draw format where, if you choose Ben Johns, you're spending a lot of money on him and you can't pick another Anna Lee Waters to go with them, for example.
But how many MLP championships have the two of them taken?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's fascinating to see that there are people that thrive in this format. Why? Because they're the best players?
Right.
No.
Right. Yeah. There's a team mentality and something about the chemistry of MLP rewards different players than the PPA. So yeah, Ben and Anna Lee have not. Well, didn't Ben take a title of MLP 1?
But it's not. They're not taking it every.
No. And going into the finals, it looked kind of clear cut. Not immediately going into the finals, but if you go back to a few tournaments before, it looked like Anna Lee Waters, Ben Johns, separate teams, and Anna Bright. The three of those teams were surging, after Ben Johns got switched over to the
LA.
Mm-hmm. The three of those were surging. It looked like two of those three would meet and go to the finals. But then we have the sliders who, got picked. That storyline by itself was really cool. Like, who was it that picked them as their opponents because I thought they would be easy to run over? And they ended up beating them, and then they took it all. Like that storyline, the storylines are more compelling in MLP to begin with. And then you have the different kind of energy and pressure. And then you get to see these exciting matchups and unexpected chemistry. So anybody in particular in the finals that really impressed you?
No, but I'm curious, John, like you talked about some of the things that held you back from MLP. Are they still irksome to you?
I'd say that, it's still confusing who's on what team, how to keep track of those teams.
Yeah.
It might be something just with me. I think some people share this with me, but it might be kind of a quirk that I have. Like I can't really, I still have an issue figuring out which teams are associated with which players. And, the big names on the players, on the teams, but then who are the third and fourth seeds? It's just like there's a lot to take in there.
It's still like your favorite based on the players that you identify with, not the teams that they identify with, like we would in like professional football or any other sport, really.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not that I was like, let's go Dallas, but it's about the chemistry and the players that comprise the team. Yeah.
One thing that gets under my skin is like all the people that aren't players that are just hanging out on the court. Everybody has to have like 2 or 3 attendants with them. It's like, really? Just one coach and like 4 players. I think that's all you need.
Yeah. Last year was out of control. People just like roaming around the court.
Like, who is you?
Yeah, right. Cousin of somebody?
Right.
I don't understand this. But any players in particular that caught your eye?
It's just really fun to just see the matchups. Like I mentioned, I get like feeling a little stale at PPA after a while, just seeing the same teams
for sure
over and over. So it's fun to see the matchups.
I gotta say, I've always been a fan of CJ Klinger, but him stepping up in such a big way in the MLP finals and the lead up to the finals, you gotta love that kid, especially as I remember looking like CJ. I wasn't ever as tall as him, but like in high school, and I hit that growth spurt.
It's lanky.
Just lanky. And I was just walking around like, I look like an idiot. Like, I don't know how to control my body. Not that he does, but in between points, you can see he's just kind of a little bit awkward, And I totally understand that because he just grew like 6 inches over the past 2 years. But then the point starts and he's a pickleball god. I don't understand. I can't rectify how he's so kind of goofy looking when he's not playing, and then he just plays.
It's all
so
a ruse,
amazing.
John. It's all a mind game. He's playing the long game.
Who can't love CJ Klinger? He's just like just got a vibe about him. So, oh my God, he picked up his game so much in this series. He's got to be one of the best, most improved players from the beginning. Leah Jansen, solid OG player whose OG skills fit this format perfectly. She came through every dream breaker. Her single skills shined, and she played her role perfectly in the women's and mixed doubles. So good for her.
That's a great example of a player who may never win another singles title again. Sorry.
Right.
Doubles are probably a stretch.
Right.
But something like this, she can still rise to the top.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Anyway, and then there's like the spontaneous crowd eruptions, like Final Point is just like there's an energy there that's palpable, that's distinctive. And I think, for the first time, I see the promise and what MLP brings to the table. So good stuff. I had a great time going back and watching the reruns on Pickleball TV. That's another benefit of Pickleball TV. If you're subscribed, you can just go back and grab matches. You can filter by tournaments and look at round of 64 on up to, or 32, I think is when it starts, up to the finals. So good format there. Good use of that platform.
How much is that?
It is, I think, $69 a year if you pay annually, which I think for me for sure is a no-brainer. But I think that value is probably a good value proposition for a lot of people who do enjoy watching pro matches. Okay, let's move on to paddles of the week.
POTW.
Let's jump into the Luzz Pro Cannon. So that one is the blacked out one.
We'll grab both.
Yep. So Luzz, we never had a relationship with. They've reached out a few times. I reached back to them a few weeks ago. They sent me these two paddles, and I'd heard of the Cannon before, and I knew that they had issues with the first one failing PEF at UPA-A, and they've revised it. So the Pro Cannon is a Gen 3 floating core with polypropylene in the center and EVA band around the outside. And if we look at the X-ray here, you can see it's very, very similar to the Selkirk era and the 11624 Power series with the honeycomb polypropylene and then fully floated in that band of EVA. Looks like they also have edge foam going on the outside of the EVA all the way down into the handle. So familiar setup, not the Yola diving board, but the fully floated core that we see some of these other companies using. This probably the most amazing thing about this paddle, we'll talk about how it plays in a second, which is good, is the price. So it's $92.65 after code. That shocked me. Like I didn't look at the price when I got it. I played with
code,
it.
without code?
It's with code.
With code.
After applying the code, it takes 10%
Totally
off. It drops it below $100.
Totally worth it.
Like I said, I did not look at the price until a couple of days ago. I was playing with it, had a few hours with it, check out the X-ray. I was like, this is a pretty darn good paddle. And then I was like, all right, is it going to be $260? That's going to be too much. Is it going to be around $200, which is what I expected? Below $100, no brainer. If you like kind of the Gen 3 polypropylene feel, then I think this is a super, super solid option. Let's talk about how it played.
Clearly a power-oriented paddle, not at the very top of the power curve, somewhere in the middle probably, but the power is just very easily accessible. It's a very forgiving paddle as far as generating that power. You just surprised me with the price, actually, because I thought it was going to be more. If this were 4 months ago, this paddle would be kicking ass all over the place.
True.
Everybody would be talking about this paddle.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the timing of when we're receiving this paddle means that it's kind of stuck in a cohort of dozens of paddles with this construction that play very well. It's very good for what it is.
Yeah.
But does it stand out really in any way? Not really.
Yeah. Where would you put it feel-wise compared to the paddles on the market? Does it feel like a Yola Gen 4, Yola Pro 4, or does it feel more like the Selkirk era?
No, not like the era. I'd put it closer to the Yola in terms of, acoustics, in terms of feedback coming through the handle. The forgiveness of it, the sweet spot, I would say, I don't know, maybe a little less than the Yola in terms of size of sweet spot.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it is elongated, so you'd be comparing it to the Perseus. Yeah, I could see it doesn't have quite as much of a wow factor in terms of how broad the sweet spot is for an elongated paddle. So I kind of feel you on that. I think the firepower is slightly lower than the Pro 4s. I'd put it like somewhere in between the 11624 Power Series and the Selkirk era,
Mid-power.
Those low power level, and the Yola Pro 4s, so somewhere in between there. Yeah, low to mid power. It did feel really good to hit, though. I'd put it. It doesn't quite feel like a Pro 4 or the Selkirk era / 11624 Power Series. It has kind of a unique feel on its own. I thought looking at the X-ray, it's going to play exactly like the 11624 Power Series. Not so much. It's not quite as stiff.
Yeah, not quite as hollow feeling either.
No. Less poppy, more of the power feel when you take big swings, less of the immediate ball jumping off the face when you're dinking. But I think it feels a good spot within this construction of paddles because it does kind of play in its own realm for this construction. And for $92, I mean, it competes with both the Selkirk era and the 11624 Power very well.
I'll just say I had a ton of fun with it. I came into it thinking, okay, it's shaped like every other paddle out there. It's got nothing for branding.
Yeah.
I'll just, whatever. I'll do it for John. But I had a ton of fun with it. I mean, does a lot of things well. It's kind of like the Franklin, The Franklin doesn't stand out for any particular characteristic.
Right.
Neither does this.
Right.
But you just have a ton of fun with it.
It's going to be a contender on my budget list for value. It doesn't get much better. And yeah, if you're not a fan of the full foam paddles for whatever reason, you do like let's say you have a Perseus 4 16 millimeter, and you're looking for a more budget-friendly option. I think this is certainly an option. It doesn't play exactly the same. I'd say it's a little less on the firepower scale. Like we said, maybe a slightly smaller sweet spot, but we're talking like micrometers, So nothing super noticeable in terms of a diminishing sweet spot. But yeah, it does have its own personality. Some other cool things about it, it's 1 year warranty. It's dual certified, so you can play with it, at PPA and USAP events. And it looks high quality. Looking at their website, now clearly there have been some durability issues with all Gen 3 paddles. There are some that are more durable than the others, and the ones that are more durable are constructed like this one. So we have the Selkirk eras, and we have the 11624 Powers, which, yes, there have been some isolated incidents of core crushing, or maybe slightly. I think the owner of 11624 came out and said we have I think it's like 2% return rate on their Power Series, which is very respectable. Everybody wants a 0% return rate, but 2% of their paddles are core crushing. That's really exceptional for a Gen 3 construction, which are generally more fragile. So I have a feeling that this is going to be on the more durable side, and they said right on their website that the core is not pre-compressed, so that's promising. And yeah, good stuff from Luzz.
It definitely gathers some ball dust.
It does, yeah. Everything is black on that, including the text, except for the little white logo on the rubber band.
What does Luzz mean?
I don't know. I'll reach out to him and ask. But normally, I'm not a fan of the black edge guard on black raw carbon fiber with the black handle, but it works on this one. Something about the black laser graphics on there where you can only read it under certain angles. It's pretty cool looking.
There's something to be said for an inexpensive paddle with, it's basically a stealth ninja paddle, right? That you can take to a court. beat up on people all day long, and they're wondering what the heck you're playing with because they've never heard of it, and they can't tell what it is anyway.
They can't even read it. Right.
But, I mean, this thing it's fun.
Yeah. It's a good spot
Actually,
for it.
this paddle is also fun.
Let's talk about that one. I'm excited about this one. And, this has been a sleeper company for me. I didn't expect much, and, it was, but they surprised me with both of these paddles. So we've got this Luzz Pro 4 Inferno is the name of this model. It is not under $100. It is $194.65 with code. So it starts just over $200. You can get it 10% off with code. This one is an all foam, full foam paddle. And if you look at the X-ray, it looks very similar to the polypropylene construction, but with full foam in the center. So this puts it very much similar to the Selkirk Boomstik and its construction, as well as the bread and butter.
Floating EPP center?
Floating full foam center, but it's not EPP.
It's not.
Interestingly, it is the MPP foam. So we've got like that micro-porous foam that Ronbus put out with that's another one of their paddles that they put it out.
Can't keep track.
Refoam, yes. The Ronbus Refoam had MPP foam in it. So it's a really micro-porous texture. So I think this is very fascinating because it's made like the top performing full foam paddles with an EVA band around it, multi-density foam. So normally you have expanded polypropylene in the center, and this is the case on the Selkirk Boomstik. It's the case on the bread and butter Loco. It's the case on the Honolulu J2NF and J2FC Plus. All of these are very similar construction, but they all use expanded polypropylene. This is the first to use that similar construction with MPP in the center instead of EPP. So fun to experiment with this. And it actually has 3 densities of foam. So it has the MPP in the center, the EVA band around that, and then another layer of expanded edge foam in the very external perimeter of the paddle. I forgot to mention the layup on the Cannon, but the layup is the same on the Inferno, which is a unidirectional on top and then a 3K layer of woven carbon fiber right beneath that. And I haven't dissected it yet, but it seems like there's just 2 layers. Instead of the 3 layers, which is traditional. But we're seeing a lot more paddles lately coming out with just 2 layers. And technically, a bidirectional woven cloth is 2 layers, woven together. So we can call it 3 if you want. But yeah, it's unidirectional on top, bidirectional on bottom.
And what would that give you?
It's just a little bit more face flexibility, which I think is a really good idea with full foam, especially something like MPP, which feels a little softer to the touch for the dwell time, right? Yeah. If you got putting unidirectional layers at 90 degrees to each other increases stiffness, which is good for strength, but do we really need, bulletproof paddle faces, or can we mess around with the angles and get a little more flexibility as long as it passes deflection? And that's what they're doing basically with these 2 layers. All right, let's talk about how it plays. What did you think of it?
Well, again, I was taking this out of the bag. I'm like, well, I'll just hit it for whatever. No name company. It says PolyCOR here, so I'm thinking maybe you gave me a Gen 2 paddle or something like that. But this one's even more fun than the other one.
Yeah.
It brings even more power, but with more forgiveness. For all the things that the last paddle did right, this one does it right +1.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun to drive the ball with this paddle. It gives you a ton of pop, but it's controllable pop. I had a lot of fun playing defense with this paddle. Just holding it up, doing a 1-inch, and just resetting balls all day. There was a couple of points yesterday. We were playing against Michael and Mackenzie, fantastic players, and young, so I have to be at my best to even compete. But we got stuck in a defensive position, and I'm just doing this 5-6 times until I can do something more offensive with the ball, and just having a ton of fun on shots like that.
Nice. I agree. There's a control element to this. It's definitely a power paddle, but it's very high on control. And for all the talk recently about how the Quanta is the budget boomstick, this isn't budget, $200, but I would put this way more comparable to the Boomstik than the Quanta in terms of feel. A step down in power, though, and a step up in control. So if the Boomstik is too uncontrollable for you, if you're popping up balls, I think this is a very valid alternative because it does feel a little more plush and a little denser, I'd say, than the Boomstik. But the sound is even more aggressive. Did you hear the boom on this thing? Good God. Like, it's louder than the Boomstik.
It's not that hollow. It's a very firm, powerful sound.
It sounds like hitting a wood block. Yeah. So very loud sound. So it's aggressive in that sense, but it's more controllable, I'd say, than the Boomstik, which is saying something because the Boomstik, yes, it's very poppy, powerful, but it still has great control. I don't feel like it's definitely stock. It doesn't have quite as big of a sweet spot side to side as the Boomstik, but I haven't messed around with perimeter weighting to know what happens if you put 7.5 grams at 3 and 9. Is it going to?
It might add a little bit of heft to this.
Yeah,
this
that one comes in at a little higher swing weight, so you're not going to be able to put that much there without it going into like the high 120s. But I think if you put some down on the cheeks, you'll be able to mitigate the swing weight increases, maximize the twist weight increases, and this is going to be – it already is a good paddle. So my point there is that, yes, this is another competitor to Selkirk, plays slightly differently, but if you're feeling like the Selkirk Boomstiks are too hot, you don't want to pay $333, $200 is your price range, this is a very valid option. And I love the fact that they're being innovative with the types of foams in the paddles, because there have been so many that have come out recently. Yes, this is an amazing formula with the floating EVA band around the EPP center, but now we have MPP, which is a different type of foam. So let's see how this one pans out.
It works, and it's a very interesting rejiggering of kind of a tried and true formula now. We're so into power now, and just forget about control. If we can get control, that's fine, but we're going to focus on power. This one, like you said, takes down that power, but gives you a ton, man.
Yeah, I like it. Well done, Luzz. Both of us seem to be duly impressed. So good to see another brand do well. I don't know their backstory, where they're from. They might be. I know that they're in Asia somewhere. I don't know which country, though, so it'll be fun to learn more about them.
I'm having a hard time with it, though, John, because I worked with this guy with that name and didn't like him. So
the surname was Luzz?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe this is their surname. Speaking of surnames, Facolos is also a surname of a Vietnamese family, and that is our next paddle we're going to look at. So the Facolos Elite-X.
There we go.
As I mentioned at the head of the show, I picked this up in Vietnam. The owner of the company, one of the owners, it's the daughter of the founder. I think Jessica is her name. I went up and said hi. I was introduced by one of the people at Stacked Pickleball in Hong Kong there, and she had a booth set up at the Hong Kong Open. We chatted a bit, and she gave me this to try out, as well as a bag. So I'll talk about the bag another time. It's actually a really nice Pro Tour bag. But this is, if you go look, did I put the X-ray in here? I did not.
I don't think so.
Okay. It is a Gen 3 paddle with a diving board peninsula effect, very similar in construction to the Yola 3S. So it doesn't have the neck foam protruding into it like the Pro 4s, but it does have this peninsula of presumably an EVA or some sort of softer foam around the edge foam around the very perimeter, and then honeycomb polypropylene in the center. And it has the arrow curve top, very reminiscent of the Hyperion shape, elongated. So this is not a hybrid. I have the swing weight written on here, 120.13, which is very standard for an elongated paddle. So what are your thoughts on the playability of the Facolos?
It's not a power paddle. It's probably more along the lines of all court, and maybe even these days pushing kind of high control, if we're still using that term, control. But, I think these days, if you want to be successful in the all court paddle category, you've got to be lightweight and you've got to be super forgiving.
Right.
Otherwise, what's the point? Because the power paddles are giving you those things. So you've got to be even more so forgiving and more so lightweight to be, highly customizable. And this paddle didn't get there for me in terms of those two factors, forgiveness and weight. So for me, it's not the best fit, but I think it's an okay paddle. I don't know what the price is. I would say if it's on the inexpensive side, then it might be a winner.
I price is 4.5 million Vietnamese dong.
Okay. That is,
Which is, I had to look it up, $170. I was like, wait, does that say 4.5 million? What in the world? Yes, $170.
carry around your money in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah. So for us, $170, I think it's, a decent paddle. I tend to agree, Eddie, that and again, we are very spoiled right now with all of the July, August releases. There's been a big jump in terms of the forgiveness tied into power of the paddle. So we're probably biased because neither one of us are playing with more control-oriented paddles these days. Both of us are on the power side of things. So that right away was noticeable to me too. It did not have the firepower of, any of the current power paddles we're talking about in the current landscape. I agree, Eddie, that it's probably right in the middle of the all-court category in terms of its overall firepower. It had a pleasant feel when you hit it. Nothing wrong with the paddle for sure. And I saw a lot of these being played at the Hong Kong Open, so it's a popular paddle. But yeah, I mean, it feels like a softer version of the Yola Hyperion 3S. So
Okay.
solid paddle. By today's standards, if you're looking for a power paddle, this definitely wouldn't be it. But if you're looking for a more control-oriented paddle, and certainly, you live in these areas in Vietnam, et cetera, this is a very viable paddle. So it'll be fun to see what Facolos does with their paddle inventory, see where they go. I'm sure they have some full foams on the way. They are apparently a large family there, so we will be seeing more of them, similar to kind of Sypic, that level of family presence in Vietnam.
It's a very high quality paddle. It's put together well. You can tell that there's a lot of care put into this. I look forward to their next offerings.
Yeah, for sure. And I will talk about the bag too, because I was actually duly impressed with it. Alrighty, let's move on to the Carbon TruFoam Waves paddles. So we've got a couple behind me.
Maybe just one.
Okay. Now, we can't talk in great detail about them, but we can show them. So this is the one shape.
Show the other side. That one's got a giant pink streak.
Does it?
Yeah. On the other side.
Where's the pink streak?
It's right.
Oh, what happened there?
I don't know. Probably just rubbing up against another paddle in the bag.
But yeah, so this is their newest paddle in the TruFoam line. So the TruFoam Genesis was first. It will come in all four of their shapes. So 1 being their elongated, 2 wide body, 3 is the elongated with the short handle, and 4 is their new hybrid shape. We can't talk about what's going on in the core, and I will say that the swing weight to twist weight ratio is more favorable on these than the original TruFoam Genesis series. But Eddie, I guess I'll jump in. You've been going first here. So I would put the firepower slightly above the TruFoam Genesis series, but not anything that's going to hit you over the head. Like, this is so much more powerful than my original TruFoam Genesis. So I'm thinking if you're playing with the TruFoam Genesis 1 right now, or whatever shape you're playing with, and you like it, but you feel like you need just a little bit more firepower, then these are going to be great because they feel very similar. The feel is very similar to the TFGs. The power is a little bit higher. I need a little more time with it before I can really get a sense of where that power is coming from. Is it more full swings or poppy swings? But I'd also say that I noticed a very slight increase in sweet spot and stability across the face. I feel like the original TFG had a bit more of a hot spot in the center and a steeper drop off. I feel like this one has a bit more of a stable surface. I wouldn't call the sweet spot oversized. I haven't played around with weights, but I do want to put weights on the perimeter and see how much that expands the sweet spot. But I think the sweet spot feels a little bit better than the TFGs to start with.
100% agree, John. I shared these around with my group, and they all really like the paddle, very favorable towards the paddle. And like you said, it's a little bit of punch addition to what we saw in the last generation from carbon. It's not a leap forward. It's a step forward in power. And you're right. There's a little bit more forgiveness in the face. There's not that kind of steep drop off that people have been reporting. So I don't know if they did something different with the
fiberglass patch.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it's certainly an obvious place to look in terms of change for this paddle.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's fun. We're on the same page. We're reconnecting again here, Eddie. We're diverging on our opinions on the past few podcasts. Now we're perfectly aligned.
Would you say the feel is any different than the previous generation?
I'd say they're very siblings to each other compared. Like the feel is very similar. Clearly, this is based on a few hours of playtime with them, so I need much more experience before I can get the nuances. But yeah, I'm not picking up on anything drastic. How about you?
It felt to me like it had a little bit more hollowness than the previous version.
Okay.
Previous version felt firmer, a little bit more thud. This one just pushes it a little bit towards the bonk.
Okay.
That's the
see
spectrum
that,
for me,
bonk.
by the way.
So it goes from bonk to what's the other side? Thud to bonk. All right. I agree. I can see that being the case. I also feel like this even improves on the spin and the dip you get on the balls over the TFG. Something about this one, I was just like, that's probably its biggest strength at this point to me, is the ability to really kind of go a little bit semi-western on my drives and serves and still get the ball to dip in. This is a very, very high spinning paddle. It doesn't feel that dwelly compared to some of the newest full foam paddles, but I feel like it has something to do with the dwell that's increasing the spin, because the texture is not any different than the TFG.
And that could be some of that hollowness that I'm feeling as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good.
All right. So again, these will be coming out on the 25th of this month. All right, let's talk about our thoughts, any updated thoughts we may have on the Ronbus Quanta. Do you have those paddles in the back?
There's a couple behind you.
There we go.
Yep.
All right. So I did weight these up. We played with them stock last week and then started adding weight. And got a couple of scenarios here. I'd like to get your thoughts on which you preferred here, Eddie. How you changed the overgrip. You like the dry.
I do.
What happened here? How'd you get this Ronbus rubber band? I think I took mine off. Did you find
I just took it from a different one.
Okay, gotcha.
You're very detail-oriented, John.
This is the Eddie setup. Mine is his signature.
Yeah.
But one method I've found that I'm liking, I messed around with like 3 grams on each side and 6 grams on each side and a little weight here, a little weight there. Then I was like, screw it. I'm going to put half gram per inch tape starting at about an inch above the grip and wrap it all the way around the face. Now, guess what the swing weight on this is?
Stock?
Stock, it's like
110?
105.
Okay.
105.
105.
With this much, this is like 17 inches or something.
That's absurd.
Yeah. By the way, this is the new Pickleball Effect tuning tape. And it's a cheaper alternative to the tungsten tape. So tungsten keeps going up in price. I think the half gram per inch is like $26 per package, and you can knock $10 off that with this. And my fear was it was going to get really thick, like a lot of the other cheaper tungsten tape.
I thought it was tungsten tape,
and it's
so what is
might
it?
Be secret formula. It's not tungsten, but it's not lead. It's
ancient Chinese secret.
Yeah, right. There's no toxins in it, as far as we know. But yeah, I think it plays great. This is a clear alternative to the half gram per inch tungsten tape. Braden's coming out with a gram per inch. He says that is quite a bit noticeably thicker than the tungsten alternative.
Okay.
But I honestly cannot tell a difference. Yeah, I can. If you hold them out side by side, the half gram tungsten is super, super thin. This one is not anywhere close to being a hindrance. Yeah. So good
Braden
stuff.
has so much of my money now. That tungsten tape is expensive.
It's very expensive, yeah. So wrapped it all the way around. I did that for both the R4 shape and the R2 shape. And then I played around with replicating the Boomstik weight configuration, adding 7.5 grams on each side, concentrated at 3 and 9 for the R3 shape, their classic kind of Perseus elongated shape. Did you have a preference on these weight setups?
I came into it thinking one thing, and I left coming out with something else, John.
Okay.
I really like the R4 shape. It's growing on me. In fact, I just ordered one for myself. Spent my own money on an R4. Just to have two different ones, one stock, and then one will continue to customize. I thought this was going to be the one for me as I played with it yesterday. And it was great. I really enjoyed playing with it. But then I picked up the Boomstik replica. And man, I was just killing it with that paddle.
Oh, really?
Something about just the location of the sort of the sweet spot where the max core is on that paddle. And the forgiveness of, there's something about the concentrated weight that is doing something to the sweet spot and the forgiveness of the paddle that the full wrap or weight somewhere else is not doing.
Yeah.
And maybe you could explain that to me, but I had so much fun with this particular paddle. Had a really great time. I think what I'm going to do, though, is take the R4 and set it up like the Boomstik and see what that gives me.
Yeah. It's funny. Selkirk is now influencing the paddle reviewers because, you know, for so long we've been kind of like, we've gone back and forth as a reviewer community on, is it better to concentrate your weight or spread it out? And originally it was like, let's concentrate it at 8 and 4 because that's going to give you the biggest bump in twist weight while mitigating swing weight. And then I feel like over the past year we've been going back to, it's better to kind of spread it out because, you know, the sweet spot is like drawn to weight like a magnet, you know, and you're maximizing your sweet spot increase by spreading the weight out. But we can't argue with the fact that the MOI system, or at least the weight setup, 7.5 at 3 and 9, plays exceptionally well. And originally I thought maybe it's just the construction of the Boomstik that this works well on, but I tend to agree that it works well, particularly on this elongated shape. I did try this on the wide body. It didn't get quite the same feel, but I only played a couple of games with it before I switched to this. So I want to go back and test that and give it more of a chance on the other shapes as well. But yeah, I mean, Selkirk is now changing all of our minds. I think they're probably pretty happy about that. But overall, do you have any changed opinions on the Quantas compared to what we talked about last week?
I do think the additional weight to the perimeter it changes the dynamic of the paddle. It makes it more forgiving, obviously, but it changes the pop and power characteristics to something a little bit more actually tuned down from where they were stock. And I'm liking that tuned down feeling. It's giving me more the control that I'm looking for.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I stick by what I said last week is that stock, to me, they feel a little generic. Definitely a power paddle, a very poppy power paddle, but all of the personality of the paddle opens up when you add weight.
Agreed.
And there's a lot of nuance you can feel in the paddle that wasn't there without the weight. And I think that's totally fine to come in super lightweight stock, you know, and you're providing a blank slate to consumers, which paddle enthusiasts tend to be a big fan of. But another issue with that is you're going to end up paying $20 at least for edge perimeter weighting per paddle, right? Or, you know, this took up most of the package of the tuning weight, which is $25 or something. Or maybe it's $18, something below 20, I think, for the tuning weight. Regardless, you're going to end up spending some money. You're buying a $100 paddle or $98 or whatever it is, but you're going to spend some money tuning it up. Still an amazing value proposition. I'm going to update I need more play time with this, but I have a feeling this is going to take the best value spot in my late summer 2025 paddle comparison, which before was the Vatic Saga Flash 14 millimeter. That's still an amazing paddle. This, I feel like, is coming for that spot based on my initial impressions. And I can be a little more favorable, in my opinion, to this now that I've had several hours of play. They're very good paddles, especially after you add weight. And for coming in, you know, at $100, I don't think for a power paddle, anything else really compares to it. I think you're right. Adding weight tends to balance out the power to me. It doesn't make it overly powered. It doesn't increase the overall firepower much in my mind, but it does balance out the power and pop in a favorable way. Without weight, it's all pop for me. Like you're feeling some power with full swings, but you get a little bit of that like paper plate feel, where you really got to swing through. It feels like you're throwing your shoulder out because it's so lightweight because the paddle's getting pushed around by the ball. Once you add the perimeter weighting, you get more plow through. The power goes up with full swings, and it reduces some of that kind of overly poppiness that I was feeling with the unweighted paddles.
This might be controversial, John, but for me, it also straightens out some of the launch angle issues I was having with the initial stock paddle of kind of a high launch angle.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's weight distribution or adding a little bit of flex to the paddle where it wasn't there before, but something about the changing nature of the paddle has kind of straightened out the launch angle, made it much more intuitive.
Yeah. In terms of firepower, I still feel like these are noticeably below, I shouldn't say significantly, noticeably below the Boomstik in terms of overall firepower. I'd put them closer to, maybe even slightly below the bread and butter Locos. So I need more time with the Locos, but I remember them being fairly closer to the Boomstik than the Quantas, and even weighted up. Like we said, it doesn't really necessarily change the overall firepower. It just makes it more balanced. I feel like weighted up and stock, all of these are, if you're taking, I think there was some confusion last week when I said that the Yola Pro 4s are now kind of low power tier. I didn't mean like control side of the spectrum, as we used to call it, or low power. I meant if you go control all court power or low, medium, high power, same categories, take the high power category and look at it, where the Yola Pro 4s fall on it. Now that we're kind of hashing out where that legal boundary is, which is the Selkirk Labs Boomstik, some others are pretty close. I think that the Body Helix Flick F1 is probably over the limit, but it's way on the end there. Compared to those, I still feel like the Pro 4s are in the middle of the power category. So not necessarily low power, but definitely like mid power. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
I don't necessarily agree, but
yeah. The thing is, like, neither one of us have had a lot of time with the Pro 4 paddles.
That's also true.
Yeah. So most of our experience is from feeling the effects of other people playing against us with Pro 4s. And yeah, I agree. They're coming off very hot. The question is, are those paddles breaking down, or
That's
are they?
a great question.
Yeah. So out of the box, I need to give you the Scorpii here.
Sure.
Because they don't hit as hard as.
Okay, interesting.
Anyway, comparing this to, I would say that they have very similar in firepower to the Yola Pro 4s, which in my mind puts them in the mid-tier power category, right? Not all court. We're talking power here, but right in the middle of that power category. Not on the far end. Now, I may revise that. Maybe they break in a bit. I have not noticed any break in with these. I do also think they have their own personality. We've got the different types of foams, the tri-density of foam. It's not made in the same factory as the Boomstiks and the bread and butter Locos and the Honolulus, which all have a very similar, and the Luxes, apparently, I'm guessing. They have a very similar build and some similar attributes in terms of feel. This one is not made in the same factory. It's constructed differently with different foams, and it has its own personality. I think it's good, but I wouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion that they are the closest feel to the Labs Boomstik. I don't think that's the case, but I think they are 100% excellent option for people looking for the best value for the money for a power paddle.
Is there anything more satisfying than going to a court with one of these and beating two people with boomsticks?
Probably not. That's a really good point. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Hard to beat that feeling.
Just send them home with $333
Exactly.
more broke.
Yep.
All right. Anything else to say on the Quantas?
No, I'm really looking forward to having some more time with this paddle, seeing how it sort of matures over time, breaking in, and we will report back.
Let's do it. All right. Let's move on. So this is kind of a Tales from the Ball Cannon with some deep dive topics in here. How does adding weight to the Quanta affect its PBCOR or KewCOR? Well, turns out not much at all. And I'll get into what the numbers are and then why I suspect this is the case for the Quanta and most other paddles. And there are some exceptions. So let's take a look at the R2 shape. Stock without any overgrip or any perimeter weighting, the KewCOR was 0.395, which is right in the middle of the power category. And my perception of my opinion on what these landed on in terms of firepower was uninfluenced by this. These are recent numbers. I didn't know the KewCOR numbers, but they do match where I feel like the paddles fall in terms of firepower. So right around where the EOLA Pro 4s fall. After weight, that went from 0.395 to 0.4017, which is a bump. That puts it in, right in the middle of the power category to right in between the middle and the higher end, right? The R3, so this one with this weight setup, like the MOI weights on the Selkirks, went from 0.4095, so that was stock, to 0.3997. So it actually went down a bit. So even more of a drop than the other one gained.
All right.
Yep.
Interesting.
R4 shape. Interesting that the three paddles we actually have with this are the exact ones that I have these data for. 0.3884 stock to 0.3844. So almost the exact same before and after adding weight. So lesson we can learn here is, yes, weights move the paddle a little bit, but not really much outside of the range of expected margin of error and in unpredictable ways. I would think that this weight setup would increase the power on this one in particular much more than this weight setup on this one increased it, but it was the opposite. Now, any thoughts before I get into why I think this is the case?
We're talking about the weight setups you have on here today.
Exactly.
Okay. And I'm sure that makes a difference too.
It makes a difference. Yeah. We don't know exactly what the optimal weight setup, or we know what the optimal weight setup is in terms of how you feel about a paddle, and that varies person to person. But what we don't know is how it affects PBCOR/KewCOR yet. So there is a correction factor in the PBCOR formula, which I'm using to get KewCOR, and I have various. The reason why I'm not calling it PBCOR is because I have various correction factors that are unique to my methodology, and I also don't want to, pretend like I'm using the exact same methodology as USAP, which is using the term PBCOR, so I have to use something different. But regardless, there is a PBCOR formula behind all this that is the same, and then I have modifications and corrections on top of that. And within the PBCOR formula, there is a correction factor for the paddle in terms of where the ball is hit along the face. And that's why you see many of our paddles are marked up with inches. And to get the numbers, you're measuring down from the top of the paddle. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, et cetera, inches. And to get the PBCOR number, you're shooting at, I start at 3, shoot it until I get an average, move over to 4, shoot it, move over to 5, et cetera, all the way down the face. And what you see is the performance spot, or the spot on the paddle that gets the highest PBCOR number, varies according to paddle model and shape. So mostly they fall around 4, as you would expect, because that's where we feel the sweet spot is. But sometimes they're way down on the face up here. Sometimes they're at 3. It just varies. So you got to figure that out. In addition to, so why is that important in terms of the correction inherent in the PBCOR formula? We talked about this before. Assuming that you can see the dot we put on the handle here. This is at 2 inches from the base of the handle, and that's where the fulcrum is for most people on average where they swing. Now, some people use the ping pong grip, and that's very different. Some people like to hug the bottom of the handle, but most people are holding it about, with the fulcrum being the part where it pivots, about 2 inches from the base. So that's the assumption. That's one of the assumptions that goes into the correction factor. The other is that when you start hitting lower on the paddle, the PBCOR score decreases, other things being equal. Because when you're swinging a paddle, depending on the arc, the top of the paddle's swinging actually faster than the bottom, the parts closer to your hand. So you can imagine, if you're hitting a ball right on the handle, even if you had the same like core materials in the handle and it was producing, other things equal, the same amount of rebound, that ball is going to just dribble off the handle because it's not moving very fast compared to slapping it at the very tip of the paddle. Now, what we don't know is what they're calculating for the radius of that arc to calculate the correction factor in this. Is it a wristy shot where it's a very small radius? Is it elbow dominant where it's a slightly larger radius, or shoulder dominant where it's a very large radius? My best guess is that it's somewhere between the elbow and the shoulder. So, however many inches that is to the fulcrum, because I think that's smart, because I think that most people, when they're hitting a pickleball on average, but short of the super flicky shots, are using a combination between their elbow as a pivot and their shoulder as a pivot, right? So those two joints are the primary joints. So I think that's smart. So that's one correction factor for this. And the other correction factor has to do with swing weight. That's why we calculate the swing weight on all the paddles. And the idea behind that being that the heavier the swing weight, the harder time you're going to have speeding up the paddle to swing the paddle, right? You can imagine if the swing weight was 1,000, you're not going to get the same speed from 0 to max speed as you are with a lighter paddle, right? Clear as mud.
Got it.
All right. So all of this is to say that for adding weight, so the whole issue of adding weight, there is a correction factor built in by the nature of where the weight is added on the paddle, which relates to where the hot spot is on the paddle, as well as the swing weight of the paddle. Because you're not going to be able to add weight on a paddle, short of adding a butt cap, without also increasing the swing weight. And other things being equal, as the swing weight goes up, the PBCOR drops because you can't swing it as fast, right? So far what I've found is that there's not a cheat code for paddle manufacturers to use in terms of strictly using weight. So in other words, can they create a paddle that's so lightweight stock that it's going to, when you add weight to it, it's going to come in at 0.43 PBCOR stock, but you add weight to it, it's going to jump up to 5. So far, I've found that not to be the case for most paddles. The only paddles I've found that do increase stock versus adding weight are the Franklin C45 hybrid shape. Not even the Dynasty shape or the Tempo shape change with the weight, but for whatever reason, that Dynasty shape does change. So what I'm saying here overall is that the PBCOR formula corrects for that, and it recognizes the power potential of a paddle even without weight. And I think the reason why I want to talk about it on the Quanta is because both you and I felt it in its stock form. It doesn't play the greatest, but you can still feel that it has a lot of power potential, particularly in the pop realm. So when you're hitting a paddle and it's super lightweight and it's stock and you're still getting a ton of pop, and it doesn't feel like it's lacking in power entirely, that means it has some power potential, and adding weight is going to open up that potential and balance it in a more favorable manner for most people who don't want an extremely poppy paddle, want something more balanced between power and pop. So, that's a long-winded answer to say that, yes, the PBCOR formula does correct for some things, but I don't think there's an easy way, a cheat code for paddle companies to make a paddle that's either stock, it had to be this direction, so stock very light, and then once you modify it afterwards, you're able to kind of cheat the system and get a super powerful paddle. Not as intuitive as most people think, because most people think when you add weight to a paddle, it increases the firepower, and that's a perception, but it's not always the case. And in fact, the physics tell us otherwise. It's not to say that weight does nothing. It improves the paddle vastly. Besides the balancing the power, the sweet spot, forgiveness is a big reason for adding the weight.
So there was one paddle within this group where you saw a marginal increase.
Marginal increase on the R2 went from 0.395 to 0.4017.
Anything in particular strike you that would be similar to the Franklin?
The Franklin that went up in PBCOR? No, and I can't figure, that's the frustrating thing to me. I can't figure out why that paddle in particular. And it may have been a one-off too, because I think we did test the Franklin Hybrid second version iteration of it, and it remained the same. So what may have happened with that first iteration? Remember the very first C45s that were sent out? They did break in quite a bit. I think what was happening was those tubes were bursting open.
Okay.
And similar to like the Apes Pulse series. And remember Hayden was playing with one. It was super bassy, you know.
Yeah.
So I think we may have gotten one of those that may have broken in a bit. And from the time that I tested it originally without weight to the time that I tested it with weight. So we may be seeing a little bit of break in. So overall, I'd say that in most cases, adding weight does not change the PBCOR. And I know that a lot of people are going to be like, well, I know my paddle gets more powerful when I add weight. And I understand that. And I feel it also. But what you're feeling sometimes is not necessarily an overall increase in firepower, but a more balanced nature of the firepower, going from more pop-oriented on flicky shots to allowing the paddle to generate more power with fuller swings.
Cool.
Yeah. That got deep, Eddie.
Hey, related to that, kind of a tangent to that, I would love to see something in your database about where that max core spot is on various paddles.
I like it.
If you look at this Luzz, you can see I've got, a pattern here, but it's highly concentrated right here. Mm-hmm. Well, if that's where the max core is, I'm loving it.
Yep.
But if the max core is here on a particular paddle, and I still tend to hit the ball here or even higher, that's good information for me to know.
Yeah.
Is that possible to do that?
Absolutely. And in fact, Eddie, I'd like to share some news. I didn't get a chance to talk about it in the news section, but now's a good time. Since you brought this up, I'm working on a mobile app for the database. And it started as I was getting frustrated because something happened with the way I have my database set up on my website right now, where if you get into the mobile and you try to scroll on the database, it gives you an error message. And it's never been a user-friendly experience on mobile to get through the 100 columns on my database of 300 plus paddles, right? So I wanted to create a mobile-friendly version of that, and now it's blossomed into a full-blown Kew Paddle app that's going to have the paddle for free. There's going to be a free and a premium version, but the free version is going to have everything that my website has right now, but in a much more user-friendly version on a mobile experience. So the website... the database with all of the same variables, radar charts, same stuff, pop, power percentiles, et cetera, spin, everything you need to searchable. But there's going to be some premium stuff too, and that's going to be one of the premium things is being able to really deep dive into what the KewCOR score is all about and where you're experiencing the biggest the performance spot on a paddle, which I think is going to be super useful for people to understand. Like if you prefer, take a brand new paddle like you showed, that Luzz, you tend to hit, toward the top of the paddle. And so do I. But some people not so much, especially if they're coming from a wide body paddle, a shorter paddle, and they're playing with the elongated. Let's say that their ball dust is right in the middle of the paddle. Well, you don't want your performance spot necessarily to be way up here, if that's the case, or way down here. So at least it's another element for people to...
I love it.
To dial in
Sign
their
me up.
preferences. Yes. So it'll be fun. I'm going to have a lot of cool stuff on there too. Some other items like a KewCOR speedometer where you search your paddle, click on that paddle, it shows a speedometer and shows you the score, not only a score, but like a needle going up into low, medium, high power, and then how close that is to what we think of as illegal power, right? I got some great ideas here, Eddie. I'm excited about it. It's going to come out probably in December. That's the goal. But I've already hired developers, and this is going to be legit. It's not me working, on some scripts and stuff and trying to do it myself. I've hired a team of people to do it.
And it'll be on Apple and Android?
Apple and Android.
All right.
Yep.
Good
stuff. So
news.
if the audience, the listeners, viewers, send me some requests. Drop a comment in the comments section. Tell me what you'd love to see that you're not getting out of the current website experience, and we'll put it into the final version. Good stuff. All right. What do we got this week, Eddie?
For what?
For Q&A.
We're skipping the ball analysis again?
Oh. We keep kicking that can down the road, but we are well beyond an hour. So let's jump straight into Q&A.
Let's do a couple of quick ones here. Let me just pull these up real quick.
The cliff notes for the ball analysis, I'll dive more into it next week. But I did a test shooting the ball cannon at a paddle using the lifetime ball, the Vulcan ball, and the Franklin X40, and shot them several hundred times. And there is a trajectory where you see a break-in for the lifetime ball, which we've already talked about, most people know about, but it definitely breaks in it showed within the first 50 to 100 shots at 50 miles an hour. And then it stabilizes, but it continues to drop over its lifetime. I think we took it up to, I want to say like 500 or 1,000. The Vulcan ball also, this is not common knowledge, has a break-in period, almost as much as the lifetime ball, which might sound, most people haven't recognized it. I didn't recognize it quite as much, but I think it's because the Vulcan ball becomes out of round fairly quickly and you start getting weird hops and that becomes your focus. Not so much the break-in, but then it also stabilizes. And in this particular instance, the Vulcan ball developed a crack and we had to discard it. And then the most stable of the bunch is the Franklin X40. It does not have a break-in, and it follows a similar trajectory as the lifetime after it breaks in, where it starts and it slowly decreases over its lifetime. Significant power difference between the lifetime and the Franklin. Lifetime at the top, Franklin at the bottom, Vulcan right in between the two. So Pretty cool data. So I'll jump into that next week. And there's also a new article on technicalpickleball.net from my friend Keith, who really delves into some ball analysis and deals with vibration frequencies and all kinds of really cool stuff.
All right, let's jump into a couple of questions here, John. A lot of buzz about the Loco and the Ronbus from our discussion last week, so let's jump into a couple of questions there. First one's from Mario Caldas, 4795. What feels softer, the Loco or the Ronbus? And I would say the Loco is the softer feeling of the two.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It feels denser, buttery, if you will, more buttery than the Ronbus. The Ronbus, on the other hand, is somewhere in between that Loco and the Boomstik. If you're doing
it, does have a little bit more of that trampoline feeling than does the Loco.
I'm not sure. I've got to play with them both side by side before I can really agree or disagree with that. So you're feeling like the Quanta grabs the ball, has a little bit more dwell than the Loco, or vice versa?
No, not necessarily, but just that, if you put the Boomstik on sort of the extreme end of that hollowness and bouncy feeling with the Loco on the other, I would put the Ronbus kind of in the middle there.
I agree with that for sure.
Okay. And our last question today, John, is from Siraj CJ 1993. And this is really about the business of pickleball manufacturing. So we might be guessing at a few things here and pontificating. But the question is really, we look at the Ronbus releasing a paddle that's nearly as good as the Loco for half the price and a third of the price of the Boomstik. And the belief is that Vatic is about to do something similar as well with their budget offering. So how do companies the prices are all over the place for seemingly similar technology. So you've been to China now. You've seen what it takes to make a paddle. You're in constant contact with manufacturers. How are we getting this giant spread from less than 100 to more than 300?
Right. Great question. And it's a complicated issue. And, overall, I feel like it's healthy to have the broad spectrum of all the paddle manufacturers that we currently have. And I feel like things are great in pickleball and where they need to be. And we need the budget options. And that, yes, if Selkirk were to put out this paddle using the exact same materials with the exact same technology, they would have to charge more than Ronbus is. They have massive warehouses and factories in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. They've got way, way, way more overhead. They're investing more in R&D and research. Dong, I don't even think he has an office. I think he works out of his home. His garage, I think, is maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like his garage is his warehouse. He's got no overhead, and that's not a slight on either of these companies. It just shows that there are differences, and there are intangibles also. Like Selkirk is also funding the PPA in the pro tournament scene, and Ronbus is not, and neither is. Vatic. I don't think they've really done. Augie Gall used to be a Vatic pro, but I don't think it was much of a big contract. But regardless, there are a lot of intangibles that go into kind of the formulaic outcome of the price of the paddle that may or may not matter to a pickleball player, but it's good to have the options, right? I like a Pro Tour, and if I'm in college and I don't have the money, 100% I'm going for the Quanta over the Boomstik. And, you know, if we've had this discussion too on whether or not the counterfeit paddles are ethically okay. To be honest, if I was a college student, I would probably be dipping into the counterfeit paddle. I think there's a lot of argument, you know, that's a dangerous territory in terms of what it can do for pickleball. And, you know, that would be a purely selfish decision on my point as a college student. But I empathize with people that don't have $333 or even $100 to spend on a paddle and want something in the same performance. So arguments to be had on all sides. My point with all this is that as a whole, I feel like we need the budget paddles and we need the ones that aren't so budget, and they're also pushing R&D on that side of the more expensive paddles, which can't happen at the same scale in the smaller companies. They don't have the budget to do that. If we want to see the best paddles, if we're going to be in the best place we can be in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years in terms of the pro scene, in terms of the best paddles possible to play with based on expensive R&D, then we need to have paddle companies that are charging more for their paddles, you know. And would we ever have the Quanta if we didn't have 6-0 funding, you know, research and some of the forefathers? Now it's just funny to say that based on 3 years of history, but Selkirk leading the way, you know, big companies pushing the envelope to do the R&D needed to put these into place. We probably would have never had the Quanta to begin with. We'd still be hitting with Gen 1 paddles, right? So it's all this big, messy ecosystem, but it all needs to be in place for us to be happy across the spectrum and have a healthy pickleball, you know, landscape.
John, you said that so beautifully, and with that, I'm not even going to try and one-up it because it's just about as good as you could say it.
Well, I appreciate it. Anything to add? Any
I think
nuances
just
you see in there?
the common conception, or not maybe common, but it's frequently said that there's about, you know, pennies of raw material in these paddles. Mm-hmm. And that companies deserve a little bit of a markup? Yeah, so mark it up 200% from the pennies that you put into the raw materials. Well, it doesn't work like that, right? Just like you said. Yeah. And so we don't, you know, need to rehash all of that necessarily, but just kind of the understanding that this whole universe of pickleball does not come free.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Thank you, John.
That's a great question. I missed that one in the comment section. Normally, I at least
embellished a little bit.
Oh, did you? Okay. I like it. All right, Eddie. Good times. Good to be back. And
great episode, John.
See you next week.
Yeah.